Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box, where it was this week in 1969 that the world's most famous music festival took place, Woodstock. And of course, musically, there was a lot of variety, a lot of great bands, too many to name: The Who, Joe Cocker, Blood, Sweat and Tears, Jefferson Airplane, Richie Havens. Jimi Hendrix arguably stole the show. His national anthem remains a favorite. So many, too many to name. But I want to look less at the musical legacy of Woodstock, which I think will remain intact because of the variety of great musicians who were there, and more at the social legacy of Woodstock. Now, Woodstock in many ways defined the propaganda of a generation. And by that, I don't mean a concerted effort among that generation to use Woodstock as propaganda, and nor do I mean that the organizers, let alone the artists, were organizing a propaganda event. That's not true either. The artists wanted to create a great music festival and they wanted to make money. They certainly succeeded on the first part, but when the hippies started climbing over the fences, they said, well, we can't control the crowd. And they got on the microphone on the PA and said, well, it's a free festival now. But they ended up making money later on, and not that much later on, when the following year Warner Brothers released a film documentary about Woodstock, a concert film. In effect, it was famous for, sort of three shots all lined up in a row on, I think it was shot on 16 millimeter, but I think it might have been some 35. But they blew it up to 70 millimeter, giving it that nice wide aspect ratio, and most importantly, 6-channel magnetic stereophonic sound. Well, technically surround sound, but there you go. And Woodstock became, though, this propagandistic symbol for a generation of the people that were called baby boomers at the time, that we now sometimes derisively refer to just as boomers. And it's what boomers sort of use to talk about, hey man, our generation was all about freedom, free love, free music, free vibes, free everything. Okay, all sounds very charitable, maybe not ethical on the free love side, based on what we know now, and what others knew before from a spiritual side. But in any case, it's all very laid back. It's all very much about giving things away and being charitable. Well, in the 90s, George Carlin, who was generationally a boomer, ridiculed his fellow boomers with an iron fist, talking about how they basically sold out. They had it easier than any generation in world history up to that point. I would say now we know, because of past recessions, including the one we may or may not be in now, we know that they had it easier than any generation since, let alone any generation before. And how did they use the great privilege that they amassed? Well, they used it to harm future generations by ruling over the places in which they took power by virtue of the young become the middle aged, become the old. They ruled, frankly, a lot less compassionately than those who came before, and I think than those who will come after. And there are other contradictions within boomerdom as well. If you were that stereotypical image of the white middle class American or Canadian or French or English or Scottish boomer, you were doing all right. If you were if you were one of the people living in areas of the forgotten parts of the Western world, things weren't so good. If you were black, for instance, in the United States, things weren't as good. Civil rights legislation had come in, but there was huge disparities even at the end of the 60s that were actually getting worse, according to something called the Kerner Report that was released at that time. Look at the Vietnam War. The people who were disproportionately drafted and sent there were Black Americans and the poorest of the white Americans. The people that were going to a lot of these music festivals, not all, but many, were sheltered from that reality. Was being anti-Vietnam War, if you were wealthy and middle class, a kind of reaction formation? Was it survivor's guilt? Was it genuine? I think all of these things existed at the same time. So there's definitely an unpleasant side that was underlying boomerdom, even at its peak. And this isn't, of course, to criticize every member of one generation. That would be ridiculous. But insofar as generations are defined by certain cultural trends that swept up the majority of that generation, I say that the boomers, for all of the contributions that they have made, they really let down future generations because if the goal of each generation is to pave the way for better times for future generations, I think that the baby boomers really failed. And once you look at Woodstock, the ultimate symbol of the American boomer in that light, it really was the end of the innocence rather than the beginning of peace, love, rock and roll, and all of the rest of it. Don't mean to end on a sour note, so check out the soundtrack to Woodstock because unlike the audience, the musicians do stand the test of time because they were brilliant, particularly Hendrix. Like, subscribe, we will see you next time. Take care.